You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys. Welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast. And this week we are recapping MagicCon Grand Prix World Champs Vegas, whatever you want to call it. Was their setup vending last weekend? Basically just giving a rundown of how things have changed over the year, because basically we've had 3-4 MagicCons now. You can kind of see how they're going, what the ebb and flow is, go from there.
Yep. So we've had 3 MagicCons this year, and this is the 4th Vegas that we've had, which I think is also kind of important to note, because each one has kind of had its own feeling and it brings something a little unique to the table.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to know off the bat was, because the last Vegas where you and I were, there was one hall, and that's where everything was. That was where the main was. This was Grand Prix Hogak. So it was a modern event.
The Gak Attack.
The cosplay area and panels were in the same room, close to the command zone, which is also in the same room. You had to basically walk past both to get to the main.
Yep.
And then the artists were by the internal hall food court thingy. Had to go up a couple steps to get there, so it kind of overlooked the rest of the hall. Seemed decent. This time around, because they want to make MagicCons more of a thing, that's the vision now, this is where we are. One of the questions that I had was, how many halls were there overall that the event had a primary presence in? Because I think we heard that there was the Doctor Who TARDIS kind of tucked away somewhere, but that might not have been in one of the halls, so like Worlds, the main, like what was that setup?
So before, it had always been in the north half of the Las Vegas Convention Center, which is much larger. This was in the south half, which is about the same square footage, but it's between 2 rooms rather than just one. So there were actually 2 halls, one on the ground level that was similar to where we were at, if you take away the event space from the main.
Okay.
If it was just the shotgun artist area and where the vendors were set up, and that was it. That was basically the size of the hall that they called the Extended Hours Hall.
Okay.
Then on top of that, on the second floor, was the normal hall, which keeps your, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. as the case ended up being by the time the event actually started, where you have that set up. And basically, upstairs, day one, was Worlds, some panels, and vendors.
Now, day one was Friday.
Friday, yes.
Okay.
So that was Worlds, some panels were up there, and the vendor hall was downstairs open from the 9 a.m. to basically midnight. Mm-hmm. Although Reed Pop has kind of changed tunes on that. It's optional to stay past 11. You're not required to anymore. But day 2, main Worlds was still upstairs. All 20 people, as well as the vendors. And the panels, after about 5 p.m., and this is Saturday, moved downstairs where all the sides were, where the extended vendor hall was.
Got it.
Now, that was also where the Relentless Rats were set up that you could take a photo with, and the TARDIS was set up. But those were set up, like, in the area you wait to get in the morning. So if you followed our Twitter, I took some photos of some of the lines waiting to get in.
Yep.
The TARDIS was basically buried in that area, which there's no reason to go by unless you're waiting first thing in the morning, because after that you just walk in.
Yep.
Interesting choice.
Well, there's a point to that too, where it was supposed to be obfuscated because there was a promo that was given out, and they did eventually run out of promos, but it took a while because it was purposefully tucked away. So cool little add-on, I guess.
Yeah. And setup was Wednesday and Thursday, which I thought was very interesting. Okay. You could set up Wednesday. You didn't have to, but Wednesday was basically an open setup. Like, I think it was 10 a.m. to 8. And then Thursday was your noon to 4 smaller little window. The really interesting thing about this was that, and this is a Vegas thing, you weren't allowed to bring any of your own stuff in. Or you were required to bring all of your own stuff in. You had to provide your own 8-foot tables, your own chairs.
Oh.
Or you could pay an exorbitant Las Vegas fee to rent them for the weekend.
Got it. Okay.
Which is, another reason, as we'll get into later, this Vegas was very different than previous ones. Before, it was just all provided by CFB Events. I don't know if they covered it and factored it into the cost of booths or what, but you didn't have to bring your own stuff at all.
Okay.
It was all provided for you.
Did you get anything? So you had to bring your own setup. Did you get anything part and parcel of the booth? Like we've talked about before, how important electric is to the booth.
So we used the electric that was provided. A couple of vendors were smart enough to bring UPSs, Universal Uninterruptible Power Supply. It's just a standalone battery, charger devices. I'm going to stress this to anyone that ever sets up a booth. That is the one thing you should get yourself because it will pay for itself in a single event. They're like $150 and Gen Con charges $300 for electric. No brainer. But yeah, there was a charge for that. There was a charge to use carts to bring stuff in because you also couldn't bring your own carts.
Ugh.
Yeah. A lot of people just hand carrying everything.
It's the Vegas taxes. What are you gonna do, right? Like this is nothing for WotC or anything else. This is just doing business in Vegas. Every angle is a rake.
Exactly.
It's ugh. All right. So that's Wednesday and Thursday was set up. Tear down Sunday, and I assume into Monday because WotC's got to be there to take down their stuff, and you got to do it within union hours. And even though Vegas is a 24-hour city, the unions are not.
Correct.
So, yeah. VIP entry prior to the event. Was there a Thursday?
There was no Thursday, but they got in 30 minutes early every day. So when I say the hall was open from 9 a.m. to midnight, it actually didn't open to your general admission until 10 a.m. Black Lotus VIP was 9:30 a.m., but they wanted everyone in the building. Reed Pop wanted everyone in the building by 9.
Yep.
So you're there, and naturally, there's nothing to do for 30 minutes. Vendors are wandering around. So you're doing some business.
Yeah.
The VIP entry was insane on Friday. Absolutely nuts. I think 15, 20 people came in Saturday.
Okay.
At between 9:30 and 10, and fewer than that on Sunday because obviously, as anyone who's been to one of these events knows, Sunday is the day people just roll in late because they were out the night before.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
But yeah, they got in and they got a little look at some of the booths. The other interesting thing that kind of made it worth it was the IHOP booth that was there was handing out IHOP tokens and IHOP sleeves. And they were handing out like 40 a day. So, of course, all of the Black Lotus VIP were the people that got those. Sleeves, highly recommend checking them out. It's a magic back that's like pancake colored and it says Stack Master. Pretty sick.
That's cool.
But
yeah, it took a little while to figure out what was going on. It seemed like it was a joke when the floor plan got leaked because it came out like a week early from the IHOP copy.
Yep.
But it's interesting to note that Saturday was a little light from the VIP perspective because that kind of follows along with everything we've been saying about like Magic Fest and Grand Prix in general, which is just like, generally speaking, like Friday can be a rush day in a lot of cities because people know that's when there are deals.
Yeah.
Sunday can be a rush as well because that's when there are deals. Saturday, it's really hard to kind of pick out because that's day one of the main.
Yeah.
But you will get noticeable rushes or feel like there are more sales, more individual sales happening on Friday or Sunday or buys because of those rushes and not necessarily on Saturday. Saturday is like your captive audience day, so that it's a little bit weird. Okay. Yeah. So nitty gritty. Inventory selection for this event because you had Worlds upstairs, which was locked in, right?
Yep.
They're playing sealed. They're playing standard. They don't need really, or maybe they need something early Friday, so they'll rush in. But the main, as people should know, was $100,000 sealed event. Yep. So as we've talked about on the show before, sealed events are some of the most unique from an inventory perspective because you get to just kind of like go wide.
Yeah.
And maybe you get some idea of what the side events are going to be ahead of time, so you can kind of slant that direction. Now you have, Vegas mixed in as well on the event tag. So how did you kind of select the inventory that was picked up? Did you go by format, like mainly look at Commander? Did you go Vegas style and try and do like mono heaters?
So it was mostly EDH and heaters. Mm-hmm. So naturally at events like this, and especially with sealed, your main doesn't really have much impact on what's going on.
Unless somebody opens the nuts, the foil beseech, foil cauldron, this kind of stuff.
So you're not selling to them. Nope. You're selling to the casual player at the event.
The command zone, basically.
Yeah, the command zone. Exactly. Those guys, the ones that are just there to hang out, whatever. And you want to bring the heaters because it's Vegas. And that's the Vegas factor of it is, hey, if people are traveling out here, they're probably looking to spend some money, so we can bring Judge Promo cradles. We can sell them.
Yep.
For example, I think we bought and sold 7 or 8 workshops throughout the whole weekend. I've sold 1 at any other event in the last 3 years. So you bring that stuff knowing that there's going to be a little bit more money. There was a lot of really hard to find sealed. There were 2 boxes of like Portal 3 Kingdoms sealed that were available for sale. There was an Alpha Lotus walking around the room. It was a lot of high-end stuff because you're getting people internationally that are coming in for this.
Yep.
Filippo was there, for those of you that know who he is. Shohei was there. All of this overseas money that really hasn't been out to a lot of events because of the cost associated with them, came out for this knowing there were big deals to be made. So you brought heaters for those guys. You brought the staples for everyone else.
Okay.
Be it, subtlety, solitude, fury, or literally, Alenda the Dusk Rose or whatever from Rivals.
Yeah, I mean, because you go all the way down to like the Buddy lands from the core sets and stuff like that. Like, those will probably churn, but they're better binder stock than case candy. So
yeah.
Okay. Now, I want to rephrase the next question that I have here because you answered it already, but I want to know a little more logistically. So you brought high end, right? How was that set up in regards to your facing?
So I was on the first floor, which was the expanded hall, where pretty much everyone had an island. Mm-hmm. Everyone had a shelving unit set up in the back that had harder to find sealed, and they had it there in like the acrylic display cases. We brought 1 of every complete Moto set, basically. We brought 1 of every secret layer, 1 of every commander deck. So it was, the wire rack shelves, stand them up there, face them as attractively as possible, granted the space. There were some people that had, 10-foot shelves. And they had like giant stuff up top where it's an oversized card for sale that's up at the top of that 10-foot shelf. But it was mostly, again, it's Vegas, so you're going to bring that stuff. But that also means you probably should be a little bit more secure with it. So it wasn't ever like on the exterior of the tables.
Yep.
It was all behind where no one could get to it, really.
Yeah. So, okay. Now, also, when you're setting up your cases, so previously when we had GPDC, where Modern Horizons first released, we thought there would be money in the room. And similarly, in Vegas, we thought there would be money in the room. So we created this little high-end nook in our cases. And so the duels didn't mix with the rest of the commander stuff. Like that kind of high-end, that had its own area. Did you guys do something similar with your case facing? Like you put all the high-end in one area, or was it just kind of like Gen Pop?
So it was definitely high-end in one area, and that was what most of the American-based vendors did. And it was usually like $100 and up. That's what we qualify as high-end. Yeah. For the Europeans and Japanese vendors, it was basically power and power adjacent is what they consider high-end. So you've got your shops, your bazaars, your tabernacles, along with your power. But Wheel of Fortune is nowhere to be found in that case. That's mixed in with Gen Pop.
Got it.
But yeah, it was mostly separated out was what I saw from most of the vendors. And there was even like some vendors had cases of here's our FBB duels.
Yeah.
Just separated out from the rest of high end.
Yeah.
Or here's all of our high end judge foils. And it was, like 5 survivals, 6 wheels, on down the line from there.
When you're looking at cases like that, did you get a chance to notice if people were doing subgrades, or were they just mainly sticking to like U.S. standard of near mint, LP, HP, MP?
It was pretty much all the U.S. standard HP, MP, LP
Okay.
That was front facing. Now I know, as I saw processing, some of those vendors were going into the, played excellent, very good, like European
Plus minus style. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. But that's why I asked, because when you have European and you have Japanese vendors or APAC region vendors with high-end stuff like that, they will subgrade. So
yeah,
that kind of changes the way some people will act within the room.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. So moving along. Which days were best for sales? And we're just talking about sales here.
So sales, and I want to preface saying which day was best for what. So Friday, there was no signage that a second floor existed.
Yeah.
Saturday, the signage was up. So it made for a very weird event. Friday, easily the best day for sales. It was the busiest day by far because everyone thought downstairs was it. It was just the first floor.
Got it.
And some people did, see the escalators in the back of the room going up and went through. But I literally, at 6:55, like literally 5 minutes till the upstairs closed, two guys were at the booth shopping and, oh, you want to go upstairs? Wait, there's an upstairs? 5 minutes before it was supposed to close because there was no signage. So for us downstairs, Friday was easily the busiest day.
Got it.
For upstairs, it was Saturday because they put signage out.
Yeah, and nobody got there on Friday, so now everybody's gonna run. Okay.
Yeah.
Did the same go for buys then?
Buys, honestly, I think the best day for buys was.
Actually, hold on. Oh. Let me quantify this because there are two ways to look at buys. It can either be in the amount of money spent or the amount of cards purchased. And those two are nary the same thing because you can buy $100,000 in power and get a very few, a small number of cards, buy $100,000 in Slumlord. So
that's a lot of grim feasts.
Yeah. So as we've discussed, the goal at these events for a vendor is to come back with as many cards as possible, as little cash as possible. And you're working for more of a local LGS, you don't need to have this insane presence. So let's go with just restocking purposes, so quantity in buys.
So quantity, Saturday by far.
Okay.
Was better. Dollar amount, I think Friday was. Also in terms of quality.
Oh, okay.
Friday was. That was when a lot of the shops were purchased.
Yep.
In terms of margin, every vendor will tell you Sunday.
Yes.
Open secret. Sundays of Las Vegas, vendors pay less money because they can. Because people are trying to recoup gambling losses or whatever from the weekend. And that's just how it works out.
It's the last day, so that's your big dinner. You want to make sure you have your bases covered. Friday's also an interesting day in Vegas as well because, generally speaking, that could be your first actual full day and full night in Vegas. So you want that walking around money.
Yeah.
So, okay. That makes sense. It's interesting that, I guess it's not interesting, I should say. It's kind of expected that that's when the power would, or high-end stuff would float out of binders. And let's say less into binders because I would expect that that's people that are going to be looking to use that money elsewhere inside Vegas or to walk home with. And you know when you have items that are that large, if you haven't set up a buy ahead of time, that vendors are flush with cash.
Yep.
The buy number might be the same the entire weekend, but there's the opportunity that you just walk up to a vendor and say, here's my shop, and they go, cool, we have no money.
Yeah.
So
trade?
Exactly.
Got trades?
Yeah. So you want to get that done early on, which is again something we've talked about for a while, but not something that really has come up much because we're just getting back into, the swing of things.
Swing of things, yeah.
Okay.
For sure.
Now, churning stock. Do you have an idea of what day created basically the most holes in the case that needed to be refilled? Was that Friday, Saturday?
Friday and Saturday both, honestly. We were restocking throughout the weekend because we were selling as fast as we put things out. Orcish Bowmasters, I think, averaged 3 minutes in the case.
Yeah.
At most. But it was, in full disclosure, we were charging $70 for them. Low is 40.
Yeah.
We were paying 50 on them just to get them in because we couldn't keep them long enough. But I'd say best day was probably Friday and Saturday, honestly. Okay. And I think it was helped by the fact, obviously Friday, we were the only floor that anybody knew about. Saturday, frankly, I think I haven't seen that many people playing in sides in a MagicCon yet. It was very surprising to see, and the command zone was full all day.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Especially without like turbo towns and stuff like that, like the CFB did. If they weren't running, if Reed Pop or whomever wasn't running those, then like
no,
yeah, it's kind of cool to see. So you mentioned restocking. Did you guys restock throughout the day, or was that something you did effectively overnight?
We pretty much restocked throughout the day, and we bought a pretty big stock, but the amount of people that were there, the amount of things that they were buying, and the inventory they wanted was just stuff that's hard to keep in.
Yep.
Everybody wants Bowmasters. Everybody wants the One Ring. Everybody wants XYZ. That combined with the fact that there were very public hot lists for $5 to $10 above TCG low made it very hard to keep certain things in stock.
Yep. So that restocking was just re-upping. I'm like, here's our Orcish Bowmaster hole, so the next Bowmaster just go in that hole. That wasn't. Does that also include adding new cards to the case?
New cards to the case, because if we just didn't have Bowmasters, we needed to put something there.
Yep.
At the start of the weekend, everything was perfectly alphaed to the letter.
Yep.
By the end of the weekend, we had to see it like 3 cards into the A's because that was just a hole that we had to fill.
Mm-hmm. Nope, I got it.
And that was the card we had. So
yeah. So if you're restocking during the day, that keeps you guys busy. You get to kind of reset everything overnight, so you can continue to restock, which means you're going to be repricing effectively all the time. But there is no reason to reprice anything at the booth, right? Just because Bowmasters moved at 70 didn't mean you need to move them up to 75 for Saturday. There was nothing.
Exactly. Yeah. There was nothing like that. There may have been some vendors that were. We certainly weren't. And there was. I will say there was one card that I think everyone did it on, and it was the Swords to Plowshares, because obviously they don't exist until an hour into the event, and then all of a sudden all of them exist. But that was about the only thing that I saw price fluctuate on wildly throughout the weekend.
Okay. All right. So each day you mentioned you had to be in there by now. Well, Friday and Saturday you were in there by 9. What was the entry time on Sunday?
So Sunday, same thing. 9 a.m.
9
They want you there 9:30. Doesn't matter. They know there's not going to be anybody there, but you paid for it and they want you to do it.
Yep. So then you got your little bit of time to just hang out, eat breakfast, whatever, get ready for the day. And now was at the end of each day, the hall closes.
Yeah.
At what point in time did they basically sweep you guys up like garbage?
So Vegas is a city that never sleeps, right? So obviously there's always stuff to do, but Union Convention Town, obviously. So it was pretty much, hey, it's midnight. You guys got 30 minutes.
Okay.
Wrap it up and go.
Hard stop.
That said, almost nobody stayed till midnight. And it was vendors would just, there were some that were body bagging. There were some that took everything with them. And it was typically by about 10:30, 11 usually. Everyone's weeding their way out. They're going to go out to whatever clubs just opened up, whatever bars they want to go to, or just back to their hotel to hang and relax.
Yeah.
But by about 10:30 to 11 each night, it was done.
Okay.
And, some people stayed there to do like 1 or 2 transactions. There was one booth where everyone left except for one guy that sat there with a buy mat in case somebody needed something.
Yep.
But yeah, okay. It was usually wrapped up not quite midnight.
Yeah.
Which again, Reed Pop this time changed it so that if you were in the extended hall, you had the option of staying past 7, but you weren't required to. And I think that's part of what caused that to happen this time.
Yeah, because we've talked about that before, where there's a difference between the time the hall closes to the public and the time the hall closes to vendors, and that's basically what I was alluding to for people that didn't know when I said sweep you guys up like garbage, because that's what happens. When they actually close the hall, they start cleaning the hall.
Get the fuck out.
Yep, so they just get that big-ass broom and poke you with it until you leave.
Yep, pretty much.
So I was curious to know, because I don't think... Yeah, we didn't stay until hall closing any day in Vegas, because the command zone went empty and then it's just modern players left. So I was like, what are they going to buy? Nothing. They already bought what they needed.
They're going to sell you more Hogax.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the questions I had here was just the basic, what was each day like? But as you mentioned, it's going to be different because little signage on Friday for the second floor, then people realize that the second floor is opened up, which creates a completely different feeling. So I guess the question really is how big a difference was there between Saturday and Sunday?
The difference between Saturday and Sunday was, you'll understand this when I say it, it felt like a Midwest show. It felt like Sunday there was 20 to 50% of the people that were there the day before at any given time. And by 2 o'clock, we're just standing here, man.
Yep.
Everybody's left. They've got on their flights. Part of it, I think, is where Vegas is located. If you wanted a direct flight to anywhere east, like, Central Time Zone or Eastern, you pretty much had to leave it between 4 and 6 and get through Las Vegas airport security. So you were gone by 2. So Sunday very much made it feel like a Midwest show to me, where people are just leaving. It's time to go.
Yep. And I imagine there weren't a whole lot of panels that were running on Sunday to try and keep people in the joint, right?
They were pretty much done by 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
They had, I think, one panel that day, which was again downstairs, and that was just, all right, hey, we're done. Deuces.
Yeah, I spent the entire weekend judging, so Saturday was just the flurry of spoilers of seeing the TARDIS promo that came out, at the cosplay stuff, etc.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's discuss the bookend of the event, the beginning of Con Rush. So those doors open not to VIP on Friday, to Gen Pop.
10 a.m.
What is that like?
So everyone saw the line that I shared that, again, follows the Twitter, where 9:30, there's a line of 1,000 people waiting to get in. 9:30 opens up, floodgates are open, people are in. 10 o'clock, the stream hasn't stopped. There's still more people just coming in. Mm-hmm. And it's a very steady flow of, you can look up to see where the entrances are. Every 5 seconds, there's somebody else coming through, somebody else coming through, somebody else coming through. And it was nice because we were incredibly busy. We were so busy, and this is probably common for buyers, I just got so in the zone and next guy. I forgot to eat.
Yep.
We talked about that on the episode where we talked about what it's like working one of these where, keep your cashews handy because there's protein and energy in that. And I just so in the zone, forgot about it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was way less busy Saturday. I was able to take breaks. We were all able to take breaks. But Friday was just, it felt like pre-COVID Gen Con as a Magic vendor.
I was going to ask if it felt like Gen Con. Okay.
Yeah, it was just that constant, all right, even if there's not a line, as soon as I'm done with this guy, someone else walks up. Just perfect timing. And it felt like that. And that's, to me, that's a good thing. I like events like that. Mm-hmm. I like when they're busy. I like when I'm constantly doing stuff.
Yes.
I didn't get to see Enlightened Tutor George, another vendor, fan of the cast, a really cool dude. Saw him. I couldn't even say hi to him on Friday. He was 3 islands away, and I was Kermit with my arms going, trying to wave to him. And it was slammed. It was genuinely the first time I felt like an event was similar to pre-COVID.
Yeah.
It felt like a Grand Prix,
mm-hmm.
a busy, good Grand Prix.
All right. So let's talk about on the other end now, on Sunday. So we have to kind of quantify this. The end of an event is on Sunday. It is definitive.
Yeah.
For the players, it ends when the event ends. Right? But for vendors, like we talked about minutes earlier, the event basically ends, you could even say mid-morning.
Yeah.
To late afternoon. So let's go with that. So the doors open at 10 on Sunday. And let's say by 1, 2 o'clock. Let's call it the end of the event. What does it feel like?
Everyone is so zombified, vendors, customers, everyone, because it is a 24-hour city.
Yep.
Not because, the usual I'm just exhausted at the end of a con. This is 1,000-yard stares on everyone's face. And you don't really get a burst or rush or even a steady stream of people until like 11 or noon Sunday. Was what it felt like. Like there were people, looking and everything, but they were already serving pizza at the concession stand. Breakfast was over by the time it felt like you had any volume of business to care about. But everyone was just dead.
Yeah.
Like short conversations, literally because people's brains are so fried that they're just like, hey man, how's it going? Cool. Need anything, ask. Turn and walk away and say it to the next. It's just rote memorization and muscle memory. And even the players were just like, there were 3 or 4 that I was like, hey, how's it going? And they just like looked at me dead. I was like, you okay? What'd you say, man? Like just zombies everywhere. It was pretty funny, actually.
I don't know, that's good. Yeah, like usually Sundays are like that, and then like the burst just comes at the end when you realize like, oh, the main's winding down. We get to pack this shit up and go home, but we get to eat one good dinner.
Yeah, this Sunday's your good dinner.
Yep. All right, so that makes sense. That is just kind of just like a regular event plus the tiredness that comes with the city.
Yeah,
understandable. Okay, so the last question I have here is about the pajama party, but from a weird roundabout kind of way. So the pajama party was Friday night or Saturday night?
I think it was Saturday, yeah.
Okay. So, so you're in the downstairs, so this might not actually be relevant. But it seemed like some vendors got booted from the pajama party hall so the pajama party could start. And it makes sense with the vendor split now that because it sounded like the pajama party was upstairs.
Yep.
Is that so? You guys didn't experience that at all because you were downstairs, so you had nothing.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
It was my understanding was most people, because it was the second floor. It was basically you guys weren't like kicked out. It was just, hey, hall's closed. Go outside. Like I don't care where you go, but you can't stay here kind of thing. But you can be 10 feet away on the other side of that door before you come in.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, then from my perspective, that was Vegas. Like the player perspective is probably a little interesting for both worlds and the main, and I'm sure those experiences are worlds apart because they're two different types of events. Yeah, I know, right? As opposed to what was going on before when you had like one unified experience between the player base, but it's fractured about whether or not you bought VIP versus not.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is kind of just like an interesting and unique look. For the panels that were running, could you hear anything that was going on like we were able to in the past because of location, or were they just...
I could hear everything that was going on and nothing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The guy a foot from me looking directly at me, talking to me, couldn't hear a damn word he said. He could have said no to some card that just stayed in the buy box. I have no idea. But I definitely heard everything they said at the panel in a very garbled Charlie Brown teacher way out of a loudspeaker.
Yep, because it was just echoing around the convention center, and that was that. Yep.
That has stayed consistent. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, that's fair. And so the downstairs focus is on the main. Did any of like the world's pomp and circumstance make it down to you guys?
None whatsoever.
Okay.
So when they made the announcements for top 8 and everything, it did pipe in downstairs as well.
Okay.
But as far as, any of the coverage, nope, that was all upstairs, isolated in the back half of the hall.
Yeah, which is basically how they've run the last 2 PTs, right?
Yeah.
Philly and Barcelona.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, so it's just kind of like following suit, which is an interesting way of doing things. You just kind of isolate your player groups, and it's just like, invite only.
Yep.
Do better,
pretty much. Get good, skill issue.
Exactly. So anything else about Vegas you wanna touch on before we cut over to picks?
Let's get to picks.
All right, cool. We did not discuss who goes first this week.
I'm doing it.
Yeah, no, you by all means, you got
all right.
A whopper.
So I do, in fact, have a doozy here today. So this is part market call out, part just solid value. I am picking Mox Diamond. This weekend, lowest buy number I've ever seen in my life on Mox Diamond. Not really. I remember when it was $20, $100, whatever. There was a hot list for $325 in the room. I haven't seen that card hot listed for $300 for below $300 since pre-COVID.
Yep.
Took a look at the stocks graph, talked to some friends. Yeah, no, absolutely. Since COVID, this is the lowest this card has been. Current low is sitting at around 475, market of 578. Now, what's interesting about that is that April 21st of 22, Mox Diamond was at its all-time high of $879, which means we've lost 40% on this card in the last 18 months. Now, normally you would say, oh, well, that's a terrible thing. It's going down. Why would you get into it? Because we've seen the new price floor on high-end reserve list. Mm-hmm. It is what it is.
Yes.
It's Mox Diamond should be about a $500 card, always. It just should be. And the fact that you can get it on TCG for below that, the fact that you can probably get it for realistically $375 to $4 from people in binders seems like a really good time to get into this. And the reason I choose this is the example of like high-end reserve list is because Mox Diamond is a perfect example of a card that has playability and liquidity because of EDH as well as 60 card formats.
Yep.
Legacy's a dead format, unfortunately, but there are still people who play lands and build lands and need 4 copies of this card. So you have the liquidity there in multiples, as well as liquidity for a single copy from EDH. Now, this card is down, I think, because of the overall downturn in the economy, as well as crypto's been surging lately, but overall we're not looking great. So that's why I'm calling this out as, hey, let's look at some of these investment vehicles that were very solid for a long time and are a little bit on the downturn. Now might be the time to start buying into those because we're hitting the holidays, where they'll see a little bit more of a dip. And then a few months after that, we have tax return season where they will see a surge. So this is your Q3, Q4, pick up a couple here and there. Mox Diamond, LED, Wheel of Fortune, those are all great options that are all on a similar path where we're down significantly from our all-time high. They have liquidity and an established floor as well. Timeline is where it gets tricky. Okay. So obviously tax season is kind of a boon because people have luxury spending money and they'll spend it on this, and you'll see a little bit of a bump. And typically the reserve list is like 10, 15-ish% at that time. Now, if that is not the case, this may be a long haul. That's good and bad. Good because, well, it's stable and not going anywhere, and bad because it's a lot of money to sink into one asset that you're effectively looking for a seedy return on of like 5 to 10%. Now, it could be a couple, I wouldn't say more than about 18 months that I would expect to see this turn around. Okay. Just because as we get more events, more cons, more publicity for EDH, more command zones, and while they've said they want MagicCons to be a quarterly thing, there's still going to be a ton of other events out there where you'll see cards like this get exposure. But certainly tax season is your first window to get out of this card, presumably on the open market for a gain. And then the following tax window when I would expect us to see an overall upturn in this price, where we're not kind of treading water at the 450, 4 to 450 range. We're hitting back into that 550 to 6 range. And that's just my expectation for where it's going to end up.
Okay. Yeah. Mox Diamond, it's a decent pick. It's difficult to say that, or not necessarily say, but agree with the fact that Legacy is dead when it comes to this card, because the format's still played locally. People still need this card.
Exactly.
LGS is still bring this card in. For that reason, your backpackers do as well. They're not creating the same kind of, that format's not creating the same kind of demand that Modern is for Grief and Fury, right? So first and foremost.
But it exists, and as you know, incredibly loyal player base.
100%. And at this point in time, Mox Diamond has become this weird element of the format. So you mentioned the lands, and to go a little further, and I need to double check, I'm fairly certain that it's not just lands that plays us anymore in Legacy.
Oh, no, it's not.
there's at least 1 or 2 Yorion builds that play this because it casts Leyline Binding. It doesn't subtract from the mana value of Leyline Binding, but it helps cast it. And now that we have Beanstalk, I don't know if those decks play this anymore, so that's why I said I'd have to go back. So there is demand there. You also have your CEDH demand on top of that, as just being an incredible accelerant there. And, some EDH players, casual players, just want this in general. So, yeah, it's not a bad look overall. It's one of the most affordable Moxen at this power level. And for a singular asset, for somebody who's building a reserve list collection, it's definitely an interesting and unique piece to put in there. It's useful in any format you can play it in where it's legal. It is, I think... it doesn't get played in Vintage because you don't play enough lands to discard. That's the only knock against this card in that format. The only concern I have about Mox Diamond is that there does exist FTV relics printing, and that obfuscates a little bit the demand because that's the only foil version of this card that we have, because we have a Stronghold printing prior to foils and now FTV. And if you can flatten those might also be a decent look. That might move a little bit faster, but you're going to sink even more into it because it's about $800 on market right now. So if you're looking to sink, I think this is a perfectly fine card to do so. All we've seen are price increases, a little bit of a retraction, which we could call a correction after, what was effectively a prolonged spike. When you take a look at stocks like I had up earlier and you see the average, that's basically the sales numbers that create a nice smooth market value. But what we're seeing is not a destructive downward trend on this. We're just seeing a little bit of a retrace back to what is most likely right now a more reasonable price for this card. Will it go up in value again? Absolutely, like you said. You just got to hold. And that timeline on it, questionable. Like you said, I think 18 months is a fine look for this. You take a look at the graphs, and it's basically where this is, because this is just one of those cyclical elements, like you said. And it's just a nice piece to have overall. I don't think there's really a lot to go wrong with this. And if you have a legacy player base,
even better.
You have an immediate out. You don't have to worry about buy lists. You can just move it from your binder to somebody else's.
And I think another thing is a lot of people, when they think of reserve list investment, it's almost entirely dual lands. But there are other avenues and other vehicles that you can use to invest that aren't slumlording it, that do have staple liquidity to them.
Exactly. On my end, we're going in an entirely different direction, and we're taking a look at Aurelia the War Leader, the Multiverse Legends version on this card.
Okay.
So, when we look at the stocks graphs, we basically see that it pre-orders for $10, it releases, and then it just hovers around $5, which is fantastic. Love it. So why are we looking at this? Well, on May 25th of 2023, when I added this to my watch list, CK was buying 125 at $2.25. There were 234 on TCG Player for $4.55. When I started taking my notes this week, CK was buying 44 at $4. And there are 243 listings on TCG Player at $4.80. Market price is now $5. So we're seeing an increase all over. As we started beginning the cast today, CK's buy numbers are down. They're buying 35 at $3.50. That just means quantity is being filled. Fine, so we don't have our immediate out, but we're seeing growth on this card, which is great. And then we just discuss Aurelia the War Leader, a card that's been around since Gate Crash, I believe.
Yeah.
What does this card do? Well, it plays well in combat-based decks. It falls into Angel Typal. It plays into equipment-based decks, and it plays into extra combat-based decks because the creature has an outstanding trigger.
Really does.
Right. So, discounting the fact that this has flying, vigilance, and haste, it has an attack trigger. Whenever Aurelia the War Leader attacks, for the first time each turn, untap all creatures you control. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So there's nothing not to like about this card. And this is another great example of reading the card explains the card because every line of text on this card is relevant. Yep. The only misleading bit is the super type of legendary, as it's not good at the helm of any of the relevant themes you will see it played in. There are just better commanders overall. Now, no matter where you're playing this, the idea is basically the same. You're going to end the game via combat, and the primary difference is the method by which you choose to achieve this. So across those three aforementioned themes, Boros and Boros plus X decks represent the most popular versions of each one of those themes outside of Angels. Mono White Angels is just magnitudes ahead of all other color pairings combined.
Yeah.
So it's a bit unfair to say that Angels is the driver here, but we can't rule it out because there are people who play Boros or Boros plus X Angels. They're just a very small percentage of that particular player base. So when we look at equipment and the extra combat decks, Aurelia the War Leader remains in, by far and away, the best colors and plays into the themes of each one of those decks. Now, it is stronger in the extra combat decks for obvious reasons, but its inclusion in equipment-based decks is solely based on the same trigger, and it really shouldn't be looked down on, despite having, according to EDH, a negative synergy. And I get it. Like, that synergy element is based on what this card does. This card doesn't move equipment around. It doesn't make equipment cheaper. It doesn't find equipment. The word equipment or equip is nowhere on this card. So yeah, sure, it technically has negative synergy. But generally speaking, you gotta enter combat to win with equipment.
Yep.
And the word combat is on this card, which makes it fairly synergistic, especially when you get a second combat and you can ace two players in one.
Pretty great, set, honestly.
Right? And so, ignoring that, this fits really well in the equipment-based strategies that we see. And that's why, like I said, it's the only thing irrelevant about this card is the super type. That's it. If this was just a regular just a regular angel, there would be nothing wrong, quote unquote, about this card. It would fit every facet of every one of these decks we're looking at that we need. Now, timeline on this, in the quarter of a year I've been watching this card, the market price has been flat, like we saw in stocks, but buy list is rising to meet it. Awesome. With a decent arbitrage opportunity from CK to TCG player that did exist this week, for credit, there's a chance we will see this pop within the next few weeks because we're moving copies from TCG player to CK, draining supply, meeting CK demand. Awesome. Now, there's also going to be a reprint in the supplemental Ravnica Remastered set coming out in January 2024, but I don't think that's going to impact the price of the Multiverse Legends version too much. It might just slow down growth for a bit, and I would expect a recovery in the third quarter of 2024 as people seek out the unique arts of this card. So we're basically looking at immediately arbitrage opportunity from TCG player to Card Kingdom because that opportunity still exists for credit, and then after that we just gotta wait for kind of the dust to settle. Reprint equity on this is pretty high, it seems, having gotten a reprint in March of the Machine's Aftermath, followed up with an announced reprint in Ravnica Remastered. This was also in FTV Angels and the Ravnica Guild Kits. So on the surface, it really looks like they're just kind of leaning into this. But the reason we're looking at the Multiverse Legends, and the reason I've held it until now, is because they don't seem to want to reprint the unique arts of this card. And there's the Ravnica Guild Kit art, and this, that stand is unique. The art being used in Ravnica Remastered is going to be the Gate Crash art. That's why we're looking at the Multiverse Legends version in particular, is because this is a card that does have demand. It's very easy to move to casuals. It is highly reprinted, but the only two unique arts seem to be fairly safe, especially the Multiverse Legend treatment. I really don't think we're going to see that one again. We might get the Guild Kit again.
Yeah.
That style art, but I don't think we're going to get the Multiverse Legend look. Buy quantity, I've been picking this up over the years, mainly in collection buys, because it seemed the price ceiling is more of a glass ceiling than anything else. I probably have close to 8 that I've picked up through trade and collection buy, like I said. And I do have a handful of the guild kit printings to be used in my own commander decks. I believe I have a Multiverse Legends copy kicking around as well, because I really do believe in this card within the format. It seems to get no real heat. Like, nobody ever really wants to engage with this card from a content creator standpoint. But if that ever happens, I don't think we're going to see this card last at $5 for too much longer. That's why I think the price ceiling is more of a glass ceiling than anything else. People just don't want to showcase this card. Nobody wants to really play the extra combat step deck in content creator games because it is pretty spiky and it is a lot of feel bads for tables. It does not create engaging content, which is huge to remember when we look at a lot of this stuff. Why this isn't played in equipment decks that we see people play, I don't know, because you're not throwing in the like dozen plus cards that give you extra combat steps. You're just playing a creature that fits really well with your theme and happens to give you an extra combat step, and that isn't not engaging content. That is ending a game. So that one's a little bit of a mystery to me, but now we've just kind of tangented for a bit.
I like this card a lot. I actually, you say you can't use it as a commander. I actually had it as a commander at one point, and it was my favorite thing to do, other than aggravated assault, Sword of Feast and Famine for infinite combats, was literally Mask of Memory. Because the fact that you get an extra combat step means that all of your equipment with triggers twice.
Yep.
Jit's real good with 4 counters a turn. I mean, real good.
Yeah.
The Sword of Fire and Ice, you're swinging for 20 damage. It's great. Or, 10, sorry. But still, drawing 2 cards. 14. Yeah, but it just feels good to have all of these things trigger twice. So I've always felt that this card was underutilized in the equipment archetypes. And I don't know if it is like a content creator push that it needs, or people to just realize, holy cow, man, this is really good with equipment. And it goes in combat steps. And it goes in angels. There, like you said, there's all these reasons for it to have more liquidity. And I personally also prefer the Multiverse Legends art because it literally just looks like classical medieval art of an angel, or something from one of the title plates of Monty Python, just without a trumpet coming out of its ass. Either way, it's a win.
That's why, like I said, that's the one I wanted to follow because it was the most unique. Had this not been printed, I probably would have been following the Guild Kit version because it is unique art, and I think that lends a lot to this card overall. Like, you keep showing it to people, and eventually they'll remember it. It only costs 6 mana, 2 red and 2 white. That's not too much to ask for, especially in a deck that's going to be playing a handful of rocks anyway, to be able to move their equipment around. There are only so many ways to move equipment around for free, so you got to pay your taxes at some point. You gotta, if you're going to Voltron up, you got to expect that eventually that creature is going to disappear. It's just going to leave behind a pair of smoldering boots and explode in swords. So you got to go to the next one. And that's going to cost you. So you're going to have the mana to cast this. Why not?
And that's actually something that some people I've heard, like, because when I suggest this to them, they're like, 6 mana for a commander is a lot. What? No, it's not. The tax is easy. Because you're ramping constantly with artifact mana. You're in colors that have mana ramp. Tithe exists, Scroll Rack exists. There's plenty of ways for you to ramp and pay the tax without having to worry about it. Not to mention, honestly, a 4-butt is pretty good in Commander. Most of your removal is like Deluge, Fire Covenant, Bolt, or Swords or Path, like stuff like that. And that's fine. It's not that bad. Again, if you're an equipment deck, you get protection from all those.
Exactly. That's one of the other reasons why I like it there over anything else. The Angel tribe lends a little more stuff. The other thing I found cute is when you look at Angel Typal and you look at the commanders that are up there on the top of the type. Kalia of the Vast is up there, which is like Angel Typal by name alone, and even then it's difficult because you're just going to be slamming in Avacyn, and probably like Gisela.
Yeah, and Iona when she was legal.
Yeah, and so like the Aurelia trigger is fantastic in that deck. You're not paying for any of that stuff, and like double combat, sweet, sign me up. Like
pretty good.
Yeah, so like that deck, you can like I said, you can just kind of cast aside Angels because you're not going to be able to buff Aurelia up that well in Boros Angels. You need to, and Mono White Angels take care of they take care of their own in that deck. It's just the way it works. We've talked a lot about them over the last couple of years because of like Giada and the other stuff that's come out. And then you have the extra combat step deck, and it doesn't matter. Every one of the cards that deck plays is a hot threat.
Yeah.
And so Aurelia is just another rung on the ladder. So again, why not? It already is the most common color scheme for that archetype. So just jam.
Yeah.
I don't know. But unless you got anything else about Vegas you want to talk about,
nope.
All right, then we can get out of here. So for at MtG Cabalcast on Facebook, Patreon, Twitter, and YouTube, I am at Halt, I am Reptar. You are
at Damon_Thurston.
And we'll see you next week.